Okay, so that's basically what I've started on saying. So I'm going to look at trends, where we fit within it, how we might prioritise markets, and therefore address how we different market segments that are appropriate to our institutions, the mix of, let's call them educational products, programs that we have on offer, and also to ask some questions about where it might all be going in the future. How many of those questions are ones that you can relate to in different ways? China. Is everyone involved in China in different ways? Anyone not involved in China? Yeah, not involved in China. Where are you particularly interested in? Japan. Oh, that's a fascinating one. You know, because of the demographic change there and the whole impact, what's happening in Japan. And that's one of the issues we'll ask in marketing, you know, in doing what we call the environmental analysis of a particular country, the demographics and how that then pans out into where we're doing. I hope to be able to bring that out. Any other specific countries that aren't there? Anyone particular interest? Any country? So we'll maybe try and pick it up. The US, okay. I didn't know how much you'd be interested in the US in the group that was here. I mean, I'm very happy because I've done quite a bit of work on the US and looking at that from the perspective from everything up from study abroad as well as all the different levels of recruitment. And also asking some questions around transnational education and related. Okay, so the good news is we're in a business, if it relates to international students, that it is growing and it continues to grow fast, but it's evolving. And in particular, the competition is growing. And we need to understand who our competitors are, because the key phrase to remember in any form of marketing is differentiate or die. Because if you don't differentiate from your competitors and actually, or work out how you can collaborate with your competitors to be smarter, that concept of differentiation, which is the buzzword for anyone involved in marketing, is very, you lose it. You've got to be able to persuade someone that your product, your program, your institution is better than the competition. But I don't think I need to point that out to many in the room who are involved in the international market outside of the EU. It really, really is a major problem in the UK at the moment. And it's one that is not looking to improve over the next 5 years. It's very tough for us, and it has major implications, because it means that we're all, because the global market is constrained from the UK, because the US has liberalised, the Aussies have liberalised, and a number of other countries have a much more liberal approach to international education than us. It does mean that we've got a very constrained pool in which we are all competing hard with each other, and that's a real challenge. But to reinforce the message that we're in a good business, I mean, I've taken that up to back to 98. That's growth of globally mobile students. 4 million probably at the moment. UNESCO are even suggesting it could be as many as approaching 4.5 million in 2014, 2015, and going up fast. But that is quite telling. 2% of all students enrolled in higher education around the world are globally mobile. Haven't got the vaguest clue why. There's no logic or rhyme or reason, but if you look back over the last 30 or 40 years, it's been roughly 2% all the way through. And so with the rapid growth of higher education enrolments across Asia, and with that growth, that's why we've seen a rise and increase over the last few years in mobility, when at the same time Europe and North America have gone into flatlining in terms of total enrolment because of demographic change, gross enrolment rate. We've stabilised about 45%. Sorry, I should apologise. I'm using higher education most of the time because the data around higher education is much more available. There is very little outside of that. But I'm happy for the discussion that we actually pick up on on other levels and other sectors of interest. But the actual, the base, the information base is much more limited. So we're in a business that's growing, continues to grow. Currently at the moment, the UK is in a bit of a difficult period. The competition's getting tougher and it's driving up our costs, but that's to come in a minute. Just to remind you, that's the lead destination countries. I don't think there's any surprise, is there? Anything looks odd there? Russia? Russia has a large Russian diaspora, Russian speakers around Central Asia, the old Soviet Union, and Russia is very generous in attracting them to study in Russia. Probably not our market because it's a Russian-speaking market. I mean, we do okay in Kazakhstan in the UK because there is a demand to learn English and they're trying to move much more either to English or the traditional Kazakh language. Japan is a challenge, as you were saying, and they're trying to work hard at attracting international students because of falling enrolment rates in higher education and schools generally in Japan. So they're getting more active and they're spending a lot more money on doing it. And there we have the main source countries. China is probably up at 800,000 now. India is probably up at well over 200,000. Except it's down by about, well, it was roughly 50,000 in the UK 4 years ago, and it's now down to about 12,000. The biggest impact of immigration has been there. Anything there that looks a bit odd? No? Anyone missing? Where are you? Anyone surprised that anything isn't there? Germany. Germans are very good. 120,000 German students are internationally mobile. What do you think we've got from UK?
Very few.
Very few, yeah. It is very few.
Probably not good for our future that we have so few.
That's absolutely right. I think it's about 35,000. About less approximately. It's roughly a quarter of the Germans. Isn't it something about? Nigeria's quite a bit down. To be honest, it's only the UK and US that really recruit from Nigeria, plus a bit when you look around Africa. There's quite a few Nigerians in South Africa and a few more in Mauritius, but they're just 1,000 or so in Mauritius and 2,000 or 3,000. So it's a bit down. If you add the UK and US together, Nigeria is probably, I suppose all together, Nigeria's got about 30 or 40,000 students mobile. And of course, Nigerians now, a lot of them are going over to Malaysia. Since Malaysia's set up those education hub to attract, and we'll come on to that in a minute. Okay, just to say, postgraduate research, postgraduate taught programs, masters, that is, undergraduate and other, as you can see, postgraduate taught had grown, has declined and is coming back a bit. And all that decline in postgraduate taught programs, master's programs, was mainly due to South Asia, mainly due to India. So India's sort of bottomed out at the moment. Other undergraduate is English language foundation programs, but a lot of that this is only in the public sector because we haven't got any private sector, which a lot of you are involved in. who's delivering what in those programs. So I'm sorry about that, but it would be much higher if we added on all the returns that you might be able to make. Very much. Sorry?
Is that a growing area?
I think it is, because of that undergraduate growth. And you're doing a lot of work in the preparation for undergraduate. And we've seen a surge in undergraduate growth, particularly from Southeast and East Asia. So, you know, that does look a lot more positive at the moment. In fact, as you can see, the growth in undergraduates has compensated for the decline in postgraduate. I mean, I would suggest one of the arguments we should have for immigration is to project up where this might have been by 2015, as well as some of the more on the undergraduate, and the difference there shows immediately how many students we've lost due to immigration policies, and you could quantify it quite easily. And I mean, it does run into many hundreds of millions a year, let alone over a 5-year period. We're talking probably a couple of billion. Okay, some of you are interested in EU, I know, but that's the total non-EU. EU has flatlined, but actually it's declined a bit. The EU is quite fascinating. I'll come on to that in a moment. Source countries for the UK. The US is biased here by study abroad. So full-time US students in UK are still probably about 13,000. The rest there is study abroad. But on top of that, you've got all that's happening in the private sector and the US's own institutions, particularly in London. So the total number of US students on study abroad in the UK is about 33,000. It's quite a good potential market, but you've got to stitch up deals with US institutions. Is anyone here involved in study abroad? Yeah. I mean, it's a hard work because you've got to get the credits and everything together, haven't you?
You have to negotiate MOUs and...
That's right.
Well, we have a university of record, which helps a lot, which means that we can transfer to any other credits to for any student enrolled in an accredited US university, even if we don't have an agreement.
Oh, it counts.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It takes, that's not easy to just start from nothing.
And that is very good. I mean, but it's growing up. The UK does really well in this. We're the lead country destination for US study abroad students, and we have been for the last 30, 40, 50 years. And we've grown just steadily in the UK. India, 50% decline in the last 3 years. Pretty amazing. And you can see, now the German one has been a 10% decline in Germany, but I'll show you the variance in that in a little bit. Ireland, 30-odd% decline. So some of the EU member states have declined quite significantly, but we've seen some growth, and let's refer to that. Other markets, Saudi. The problem with Saudi, it's a scholarship market, and you've got to stitch up deals with the embassy and with the government in Saudi Arabia. You've got to put a lot of effort into it, and the problem there is it's a one-off. It's a high risk. All your eggs in one basket if you're going there, because if the Saudis pull the plugs on their scholarship program, just say they get upset at us cancelling the contract yesterday over the prisons, which often happens. The scholarships program goes and you're left high and dry because you've put all your eggs in that basket. So there's been growth, steady growth in Norway. Singapore's undergraduate good growth. Brazil. Sounds great, But it's the Saudi problem. It's all funded through one government source. Anyone been reading about the Brazilian economy over the last 12 months? I wouldn't mind betting Science Without Borders is scrapped within the next 2 years. It has been scrapped. Totally scrapped.
Not totally scrapped, but suspended, no.
They've pegged it back, haven't they? Yeah. So, you know, there was a lot of UK institutions putting real effort into Brazil, but a real challenge there. Vietnam's just been growing steadily. Switzerland's been growing steadily. I think some of you are doing quite well in Russia. What's happened in the Russian market since all the last 12 months, all the Ukraine problems and everything? Sorry?
No change, really.
No change.
Understand that our numbers have dropped because of the exchange rate.
It's
Much more expensive to come to the UK now.
So it's a much. Your marketing costs in country are very high.
Students can't afford to come.
Oh, the students can't afford to come because of the exchange rate. Yeah. Okay. They're not that super wealthy that it's, and they've got all their money wherever. Okay. And Indonesia. I love Indonesia. I've lived there 8 years. We worked really hard to try and raise Indonesia. I had a brilliant team in country. And it never took off. But, you know, over the last 2 or 3 years, Indonesia's beginning to look good again and come back. Australians have always done really well there. Now, this, I think, is quite a telling plot. I did do it a year ago in the Times Higher. It's showing that the impact of the visa regime has caused the Million Plus and the alliance groups to lose out a huge amount, but the Russell Group institutions have just carried on growing. Now, there's a couple of arguments for that. One is that the Russell Group, we could claim, are trading down and therefore trying to recruit students who previously would have gone into the Million Plus and Alliance, or, you know, Universities UK have held back and not put enough pressure on the government 5 years ago, over immigration. So, you know, and immigration is much more might be more sympathetic. I don't know. That's what journalists say, but that's not me. I don't know. But it does look pretty stark when you put it up like that. Sorry, it's not that I'm anti-Russell Group, don't get me wrong. Good for them. You know, they've worked hard at it and got there. But, you know, given the limited pool that we're all fishing in, you know, it doesn't allow for everyone to grow, which is what was happening before. Okay? So, what happens? We move on to trying to deliver offshore. I thought that was quite a good little cartoon, that. Which is an area, in fact, I'm researching at the moment, the whole area around transnational education. 640,000 students following UK degree programmes, full degree programmes, offshore, let alone articulations and everything else. 640,000. Are many of you involved in offshore delivery, transnational education? From a university or from school? Well, you know how that all fits together. The growth of fee-paying private schools around the world has been quite phenomenal. I think that ties in with that surge in undergraduate, particularly from East and Southeast Asia. That growth, and now we're seeing that beginning to happen in India, where private schools in India are opting out of the Indian school certificate, doing IB, doing A-levels. That means their kids aren't even thinking of going to do university in India. They're looking internationally. So I think that's a very definite consequence. But you see, there is a factor here. Under this group, Oxford Brookes accounts for about 250,000 because it's got to tie up with ACCA. So any student enrolling for ACCA is automatically enrolled to do a degree at Oxford Brookes. So that biases that. And then, of course, you've got University of London with 54,000 and the OU with about 25,000. So, but there are universities that are active and doing very well, like Coventry, etc. But, and then, so the other thing to note is that we all talk about branch campuses and how important they are, but they're barely 20,000 students compared to everything else. They're the high profile, high energy area, but, you know, not a lot of consequence. The pictures, Nottingham in China, Heriot Watt in Malaysia. Lovely campuses. You notice Nottingham keeps its white building, the clock tower and the lake. Those of you are familiar with Nottingham, it's its brand. Benefits, articulation. Actually, when it comes to transnational education, anyone have a guess how much on a partnership do you think on average a UK institution makes per annum for a student enrolled overseas at undergraduate level? Any guess? 20%. Sorry? 10? 20% of, no, give me a cash sum. How much do you think per annum? You know, student fees typically for a UK undergraduate programme are 10,000 quid, say. Do you know how much it gets for validating per student? Sorry? Right, 500 quid, £485 from the analysis we did on a big study. So you only get £485, you get average remittance per student. At postgraduate level, it goes up on partnerships to 1,200. MBAs are more lucrative. You could probably earn up to 3,000 on your per annum on your on your MBA. If you want to look at the detail, last year publication on the value of TNE to the UK economy. And type my name against that. That's a study we did last year. So that gives you a lot more detail on the value. And the UK is actually leading. Well, we think we are, because the US, no one else produces numbers to tell us. And so, I thought I'd mention, what I should have said, articulation. Whether you do part of the programme in the country, 1 year in the country, and then top up with 2 years in UK, or 3 years if you're in Scotland, or it could be 2 years in the country, 1 year in UK. Whereas overall transnational education in its entirety is worth about £500 million a year to the UK economy, articulations are worth on their own about 600 million. 40% of all Chinese undergraduate students, that's 16,000 new students a year, 40% of them come through an articulation partnership. So it's become really, really important for us. And there's a very high percentage of that group who came on an articulation who will go on to study masters, disproportionately high. So it's become quite a big activity, successful for the UK. How long it'll last, we don't know. But it certainly has become really successful. So just to remind you who our competitors are, there's the US. US, 275,000 Chinese students. I think you'll get all the slides. Well, I think you've got them in the pack already, if you want. But there's 275 Chinese students. Indians going up at 6% per annum. And what did I show we'd lost? 50%. So the US is benefiting because of our immigration restrictions, very directly. Saudis are going up. They've gone down in UK. 54,000 Saudis now in the US, all scholarship holders. So, and Brazil's gone up 22%, Science Without Borders. Although there was always a residual about 7,000 or 8,000 before Science Without Borders.
Can I ask,
Yeah?
Any particular reason why Taiwan has gone down, or is that really not a significant figure anyway?
It was much, much bigger. I think it's demographics. Korea, Taiwan and Japan are really suffering because of the demographic change that occurred. Japan, I mean, in particular, Taiwan, India and China and Korea, there was a pattern in the US. You did your first degree in your home country, went off and did your master's and then PhD. Silicon Valley wouldn't have happened without China and India and Korea and Taiwan. They're all foreign-born first-degree students overseas, PhDs from US. And it fueled the whole IT explosion. And in fact, half of the leading engineering and science faculties across the US are all international, foreign, who've all come to do their PhDs. So US is winning market share. Indian graduate enrolments this fall were up 30%. Not good news. Australia, they changed their immigration. I don't know those of you that follow Australia. 2008, they had same as us. In fact, a lot worse than us. But what the Aussies did, they sat down and said, let's get foreign affairs, let's get immigration, let's get the HE sector and the education ministry together, sit down at the table. They did a study called the Knight Review, and that gave a load of recommendations about why international education was important to Australia. And they came up with an approach, and the Australian government took it through. Even the right-wing Abbott government, who was concerned about immigration, some of you might have been following what's happened there. I think there were one or two Australians here even? No, at any rate. So they took a rational decision and came up across government with an approach that was acceptable to all. And, you know, blimey, wouldn't it be great if that happened here? So Australia's doing well again. Canada's continuing to grow because Canada has got a shortage of professionals. So it sees higher education, it sees education as the means to encourage skilled migration to Canada. And they positively encourage it for that reason. You know, because if you studied in Canada 1, 2, 3, 4 years and then go into the labour market, you've become Canadian, you've become oriented in the Canadian way of life, you've got Canadian higher level skills, so you're going to contribute to the economy. We used to have that here. Okay, quickly from the EU. This is first year undergraduates from the EU. Looks pretty awful, doesn't it? Those at the back, if you can't see, the three that are collapsing there are France, Cyprus and Germany. All have been big markets for us, haven't they? I mean, some of you are probably involved in language or foundation programs or preparation programs. That collapse is terrible. I mean, if I could have added to that Greece, which is going down, Poland, which has now gone right down, but it would have been too cluttered. But there are a few going up. Spain, Bulgaria, Romania and Italy are actually still increasing. And it's still a good market. Look, we're looking at up to a couple of thousand enrolments. Hello? Yes, please.
I just wanted to, because this came up in another session, but there are institutions on the continent now that are offering degree programs in English language.
Yeah.
And not only are UK nationals, British students, opting in increasing numbers to do their first degree, you know, at Maastricht and these institutions, but we've noticed on our foundation course that while students are still applying to UK universities, there's an increasing number that are because of financial costs, because of the cost of tuition, that are opting to apply. They want to improve their English, they want to get the study skills, but then they end up going to
back.
a European institution whose the medium of teaching is English.
I don't doubt that. What I would, and I can see that that would happen, what I would suggest is actually the amount of the numbers of UK students who are going to study across Europe is actually quite small. The press is making a big noise about a small number. The data doesn't tell us that. And yes, I can see why they would, and I know Maastricht, that's right. But much of the English medium teaching across continental universities is at postgraduate level. There are some places that obviously do teaching in English at undergraduate, but most are at postgraduate. And so I do agree with that. Yes, please, sorry?
Surely this is down to tuition fees here. This decline is the point where we went up from 3 grand to 9 grand.
That's exactly right. It had a huge impact. But also, so there's a number of things. I was going to try and pull that together. And you're right. So the fees had a big impact, but also demographic change in a number of those countries. They flatlined in terms of gross enrolment rate, and with a bit of demographic change, so the actual total number stock of students to which we can recruit from is gone down. It's shrinking. So the German institutions are competing hard, which is the Japanese scenario. They're trying to keep their students in country rather than allow them to go out. So a lot of competition there. But you're right. And it's not just the reality of £9,000, it's the negative messages it sends. And also, we also send some pretty negative messages about the EU in general, don't we? To me, it's very upsetting. I very openly say I'm an incredibly pro-European, and I believe we're being very ungenerous about the way we've been treating and the messages we've been sending out. But then there is a positive side where we've seen flatlining for all the master's programs. So we're not seeing a decline other than from Greece in master's programs. So, there is a good news there. The master's degrees are holding up, and the big bias is still around business management, finance, and related, the normal stuff. But there's quite a few that are growing, and these are first-year enrolments. So we're getting 5,000 enrolments a year from Germany. That's, good market. So I've been saying these already. The demographic change fee regime, I think growth will come back. I think that, they can attract student loans, and that we're not marketing them well enough. And I think that's part of the way. UK students have accepted them, have understood them now, that they're income contingent, and they, and it's a benefit to all. And I can't believe that the UK HMRC or whoever's responsibility will actually get many of the loans back through the tax office in Bucharest or wherever, but that's a different issue. I remember when they first introduced student loans back in the, when was it? I know it was just before they introduced. I had a strange phone call when I was sitting at my desk in running the education in the British Council. And this guy said, I'm from the education office in Sheffield. The Department for Education then was in Sheffield. Do you have a contact in the tax office in Slovenia? I said, what? And they said, well, we've just suddenly realised that if we're going to come up with this loans programme, we've got to make it available to the whole of Europe. And that wasn't in our planning, in the initial planning. So they then had to put it all in place. And I don't know how the returns are coming back. But they come. There's still, I believe there's a net return. When you look at spending, contributions of these higher earning Europeans to the tax system, and the fact that they're high value added in our economy, they go back home and they add to us. So there's even if you look at it, a positive rate of return for the UK, even if some of the loans don't get repaid. That's my take on it, and I'll stick with it. Okay, China. Is it going to carry on growing? What's going to happen now we're getting the impact of the one-child policy? You know, the demographic change there is going to be huge. So will that mean that we're no longer going to get the students through? Or will they come to do different things? I think that's the real big question. You ask the British Council team in China, they're very positive about it. And they believe that the market will carry on. And we've seen expansion, but it's flatlining now in the US. Australia is gaining again because of the changes to their immigration. And you know, they very much trade in that Southeast Asia area. So we're down to 5% now. And I mentioned about the importance of articulation type routes in China for us all. But it's also a very good business studies market at both undergraduate and postgraduate level. That still booms, and for those of you with any interest in engineering, technology, science, it's still, given the large numbers, you know, that come to the UK, which is about 85,000. I mean, there's always a good market in most of those areas. Economics is another one. So these data are just a little bit out of date. It's 82,000 there. And of course, they're quite savvy, the Chinese, in that there's 20,000 of them in German universities paying almost nothing. So the net subsidy is about £200 million a year to the Chinese economy. So there's like a whole university, a very large 20,000 university equivalent that is just completely subsidised by the German government for the Chinese. But you ask the Germans, they say, well, we're happy. It's building up a long-term relationship with Chinese, with high-performing, high-professional Chinese, a lot of them in engineering. They're all going to be in key positions in 20 years' time in German industry. We're happy. And so the Germans give 11,000 scholarships a year on top of 200,000 international students paying almost no fees. And we give, I think we spend £70 million a year on scholarships. And we earn probably £14 billion a year directly. We're not very generous when it comes to providing scholarships for international students compared to most other countries. I'll stop that rant. China, well, given time, let's move on from China. India. I tend to specialise in research in India, having lived there for 8 years. I've been out there a couple of times this year. Indian students are really important. Even with those declines, it's still the second largest postgraduate market for us in the world. The UK is really big. Business, undergraduates, it's our 5th biggest market in the world. So it's still an incredibly important market for us. You know, you're going to have to take a punt. Do I go into India now because it will come back again? Whatever, you know, and we'll put thumbscrews on Theresa May so it does come back again. Or do we just hold back and see what happens? You know, because at the moment, immigration policy is particularly hitting South Asia. I don't know why they're focusing on South Asia more than other areas, but it does seem to be working. They might not be doing it intentionally, but somehow that's had the impact that South Asia has lost even more compared to, say, Nigeria. And we all used to worry about Nigeria. 80% rejection rate in the embassy in the consular section in Nigeria. So it's hit particularly high. We always mentioned just now the growth of these high-fee private schools that are teaching international qualifications rather than Indian. The enrolment rate is increasing. Demographic change in India, opposite to China, they're going through a huge bulge now in the 18 to 25 age group, and it's going to carry on for another 5 years. So you've got increasing higher education participation rate in India, a larger proportion of students in that age group, and you've got a growing middle class, 1.2 billion. Even if you're 20% are in the middle class, that makes a target market of 240 million, which is almost as big as the US. So, that is the logic why India is important.
Can we just challenge on India a little bit?
Go on.
Isn't one of the reasons for the big decline from India that Indian students are more interested, always have been more interested, in post-graduation work opportunities than, for example, the Chinese
Absolutely.
and the Nigerians who tend to go home?
That's exactly right. The biggest draw in the Indian market is to be able to spend a couple of years post-graduation for work study, for internships and work placement. And you're spot on, but immigration rules have cut that. That's been the problem. The big growth in the US for India has actually, in the US, they've got a category of student where you're still under the university, but you can go for practical training, i.e. full paid employment, but under the tutelage of the university. So you're earning money, and there are something like 35,000 Indians doing that in the US at the moment on an annual basis. So they've actually worked out a way of handling that, putting the responsibility on the education institution. So spot on, yeah, it is the post-study, access to post-study employment that is big. Malaysia, growth continues, postgraduate, undergraduate, good demand, but the reason for showing you this and all of these is to say, look, if I'm going to go into a country market, actually I need to do a bit more research into the politics, the economics, the social structure, what's happening in the education system. Every country is different. And the big distinguishing factor in Malaysia is the ethnic split between the Chinese and Indians and the traditional Malays. So between the Malaysians of Chinese and Indian ethnic origin compared to the Malaysians of Malay ethnic origin. And what it means for all of us is that the private institutions, private universities, private colleges, private schools, all tend to be populated by Chinese Malaysians and Indian Malaysians, whereas the public system tends to be mainly populated by what are known as the Bumi Putras, the Malay ethnic origin. So if you're dealing, even in the UK public sector, your biggest recruitment market is Chinese ethnic origin. You've got to understand what's happening socially in Malaysia if you're going to have a marketing strategy. It's really important. And that leads into partnerships with Malaysian private providers, the majority of whom will be Chinese Malaysians in the private sector. Are any of you operating in Malaysia? Yeah? Does that have a resonance?
Absolutely. They're 90% Chinese ethnic origin.
Yeah. And you're driven, hard bargains are driven. They know how to play off one UK institution against another. So you've got to do your homework there. Okay, so I'm not going to take you through this. This is your 1-minute slide on what is international marketing. And I recommend any of you, if you haven't done any courses on international marketing, it's really tremendous to get some structure approach to how you're going to do these. And it's the standard thing around country scanning, just as I've been talking about China, what's happening in China, and just in Malaysia, there's segmentation in Malaysia. Okay, there's that Chinese group we're looking for. We're looking for Malaysian Bumiputra, probably scholarship holders at postgraduate level. So you've got to ask questions how the market segments. Do your country environment, your political, economic, social, legal, whatever's happening, we call it the PESTLE analysis. There's lots of little tutorials on the web. It's very straightforward. I do commend any of you to, if you haven't done a course in this area, just to have a quick read up on it. And you've got to think, well, what are my products? How do my products relate to the market segmentation? You know, because if it's a market that's all about engineering and technology, and I'm only working in business studies and economics, well, hey, we've got a question there. And then the next one is the marketing mix, that you're having identified your priority markets. What are the P's? I think you can get up to about 7 or 8 P's now. It started off with 4, about price, product, place, promotion, i.e. how you're going to market it, the people you're going to market it to. So there's a lot of P's, and particularly as we're also doing what's called service marketing. This could be for any product, but when we're doing service marketing, which brings in another people dimension, you've got to get inside that. But there's lots of very good reading around this. I can't teach you the full course in this 1-minute tutorial on market segmentation and prioritization, but it provides you with a structure to think through. You're probably doing most of it already without realizing it. But at least if you can say, well, hey, should we go to Thailand? What's the market like in Thailand? How big is the market, the segment we're likely to want to address? And how are we going to approach it? What is our market entry strategy for Thailand? And so we've got to develop a market entry, a market development strategy that is informed by that marketing mix and all the different media formats that it might relate to. And in fact, sorry about this. Has anyone seen Danceoffs matrix before? Yeah, you know Danceoffs matrix. Yeah, it's a really good way of understanding. Basically, I'm in this market. I'm in China, in an existing market. I've got this existing product. I'm doing it really well here. My existing product, my existing market. I'm doing good English language programs in China. But hey, I want to expand. Well, I've learned how to run English language programs. Maybe I could see if I can do a similar thing in Thailand. So I'm going into a new market with my existing product. Or else, I might be in China. Sorry, I've gone in the wrong way around. New market with existing product. Hey, but I'm in China. I teach English language. But I wonder if I can go in and do some foundation programs that build on it with an academic context. So I then bring a new product into that existing market. So those are seen as the simple steps, but then what we call diversification is the big jump, which is obviously the reason for putting it in this way, is to say that's the higher risk. You might do very well, but if you're going into a new market with a new product, that's a challenge. So all that is telling you is where there might be a low risk and a high risk, and you can sit down and assess it. I've always, again, found it a very simple but very appropriate way of asking questions about marketing. So, marketing and communications, all I want to bring out here is word of mouth. Our market is about people to people, word of mouth. Digital is important, but not how do you combine digital with word of mouth is becoming an increasing challenge. Okay, social networking, but students often don't want you in their social space. You penetrating that. That's their personal. The one thing they always want to come back to is your website. And that's really got to be good, because that's the point they'll always refer back to to double check that who are the sort of people that are going to be teaching me? Do I like them? Are they doing something exciting? What are the alumni from my country? How have they all gone on? What are they doing? If I'm on a preparation course or ELT, what sort of universities are you going to get me into? So tell the world, a bit of video as well, a bit of life. Make the site live. And of course, make sure your search engine optimization works really well in that country. Check it out. Get people to check it out. I mean, if that's the one message I can give you without going into details on digital marketing, is your website. It's because it is the point of reference. They might not like you in their social media, but they do want you to have very good, sharp information on your websites. And of course, agents, because if you look at Malaysia, I just put down, if you say you're going to enter the Malaysian market, you need to sit down and think about all the channels. Well, the first thing we know is agents are incredibly important, and that partnerships with private providers, because we're looking at the Chinese market segment in the main, are really important. We've got a good UK profile because of the branch campuses. Private schools, they're very brand savvy. So look, if your brand isn't known out there really well, think of how you can differentiate it and make it stand out. You know, those of you who are in a university that isn't in the top 500 in the world, actually it doesn't matter as long as you've got a message that grabs and is different. Not, oh, we're a high quality institution. Everyone says that. Think of something else that differentiates yourself and gets you out there in the market. If you've got a niche product, talk about it. If you're doing something special on your campus, you've got special alumni, talk about it. But get something that says that you're different. As we were just hearing, India's all about employability. Get some good stories around employability of your alumni from that country. And whatever. So, and how do you use local media? Digital marketing, all the normal stuff, won't go into that. There's other sessions covering it. Local media, they have a big education supplement every week in the Straits Times and in the other papers. You know, get some stuff out there, a few scholarships, you know, a few discounts. Get yourself known in that market. Keep telling them about yourself. You know, you can't just do a one-off visit and hope the world will change. Although if you can afford to have an office there as well as an agent, it really can work. So, you know, you need to design that. That's a different strategy because of the Malaysian situation that you'll do for, say, for China or for Nigeria or for Germany. So you need to tailor your market strategy according to that marketing mix identified through the environmental analysis. The short answer to that is not very. I'm happily take questions to discuss it, but it isn't very. Costs of recruitment. How much do you think a university, so I only know the university because I've only done it at universities. How much on average do you think it costs a university to recruit one Indian student? Say if you're recruiting 100 a year, how much, or 50 a year, how much do you think one student costs you to recruit? Sorry? 1,000 here, any more? It's probably between £2,500 and £3,000. The global competition that's gone around it is not cheap. So this brings back a crucial aspect of your marketing strategy is the financial plan that equates costs to potential revenue, because you've got to sell it to your board. Okay? And I'm just going to finish up now. Last slide. Crystal ball. Globalisation's here to stay. Just because more programs are available in country, in China, Chinese students will be just as mobile. Why do you think we've still got the second largest number of students are all from the US? Is it because the US hasn't capacity? You know, so once we're on the globalisation bandwagon, mobility carries on growing. More cross-border delivery, blurring of public and private. I reckon over this next, just like in the 20th century, we saw mergers and acquisitions in the car industry. That's what we're going to see in the 21st century in the higher education sector. You know, demographic changes, we're going to have overcapacity if we don't increase beyond 45% gross enrolment rate. So there's got to be some rationalisation, which implies mergers and acquisitions. Quality is always there, quality, quality, quality. But demand increases, and I've talked about the limits to growth because of demographic change and gross enrolment rate. So there you go. Thank you very much. Sorry about my